You must be wondering when we will be done with learning crazy vocabulary words. Our newest term is called syntax. In programming, syntax means the correct way to write code. It works just like grammatical rules. Spelling is important in English just like syntax is important in Swift or any other programming language. Swift requires us to write code in only the right way, otherwise our programs won't run. This might seem hard at first, but once we break down the moving parts, it will become easy to learn. If you get the wrong answer when you're adding, the solution to your problem won't work. If we write our code the wrong way, we'll end up with errors. This will result in our code not running at all. What should we do about that? The best way to get rid of errors is through understanding and using the proper syntax. Make sure that you copy every line of code you see in this course the exact way it is written. Otherwise, your program could end up breaking bugs. Even with the best planning, sometimes we still make mistakes. I just want you to know that you shouldn't beat yourself up over this. Even the best developers make some pretty silly mistakes. Instead, you'll learn how to spot these errors and fix them. Lucky enough, Swift is able to spot most of the errors for us and show us where we went wrong. This way, we can get back to doing the heavy lifting ourselves and make changes in our code. Now we'll move on to some important rules of proper syntax. When we code, we need to make sure we're following some basic rules. Here's an example of a variable. All the variables we create should be written in this way if we already have the data. In Swift, we need to write our code in a certain way too. Our code usually runs from top to bottom. There are a few cases where this rule is not followed, but we'll get to that later. When we write code, we need to keep that in mind. What we want to run first goes on top. Then the next action we want to take goes under it. One of the most common tasks we need the computer to do is to print something. For example, we may need to know what the current score of the game we're playing is, so we would print the score. We might want to print a name or see how a variable changed. Printing is one of the most powerful functions you'll use in Swift when you're starting out. When you print a variable, it prints out in the console. Let's take a quick dive into the console before we move on. Some of us may know the console as a terminal or a place by which we can tell the computer basic or complicated commands. For those of us who don't know what the console is, it's a place where we can test our code. We can look for errors and check to make sure everything is running smoothly. Back to printing. To understand how printing works, let's take a look at our very own printer. When we use a printer, we tell the printer what to print and it pops out a nice fresh piece of paper with just the right words on it. Printing in Swift is very similar. In Swift, we take a variable from our code and tell the console to print it out for us. This way it displays what is inside the variable. The code above would print out, "Hello friend." The quotation marks wouldn't be displayed in the terminal. Whenever we want to print something, all we have to do is to remember to use parentheses around the variable or string we want to print. That's right, we can print strings directly too. Let's take a look. If we want to let the customers in Seinfeld know that they won't get any soup, you can do this without using a variable. All we need to do is put the string inside the print statement. Then the console will print out, "No soup for you." Again, this is without the quotation marks. Did you know that you can write comments in your code? Well, now you do. We put these comments in our code so that anyone who reads it can understand what it does. Sometimes we even forget what our own code does. Commenting in Swift is really simple. Let's say we have a function called go to the store. Now we know that this function probably tells us to go to the store. But what we don't know is how that function works. This is where comments come into play. We would comment above the function and let the reader know that the function tells us to go down the main street, towards the store. This way, we know exactly how our program functions and we won't forget it later. To put comments in your own code, we use //. So if we wanted to say that the function tells us to go to the main street, we would write it like this. There's one other way in order to comment out our code. If we use a / with an asterisk, like this /, then we can leave multiple lines of comments. We tend to use these when we need to write a longer or more complex comment. It is really important that you try to remember to use comments in your code. You shouldn't code again without putting some comments within your code. These comments will come in handy later and it's a great habit to make right from the jump. In this topic, we learned about using the print statement. We also learned how to comment our code. You also were able to grasp the basic understanding of Swift syntax. Now you have a lot of tools you need to code on your own. In conclusion, we need to remember to always use comments in our code. Finally, if we want to print something, all we need to do is to use a print statement like this. Great job! You're doing great. Now you know how to comment and make your first program that can print anything you want. In the next section, we'll be learning about what types of variables and constants we can use in Swift.